Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Living on Blockchain. Today, we are speaking to Nadja Bester from AdLunam. She brings a wealth of diverse experience. She has been an entrepreneur, she's been a board member, an award-winning startup mentor, an international speaker, a podcaster, as well as a host for several events and panels. So the Future of NFTs is her podcast, and she does have a book coming out as well. AdLunam is an investment and startup acceleration venture that they have, and they are very focused on helping founders and doing fundraise and making the right connects. Despite the market being wherever it might be. So this was a wonderful conversation because I love I have to be a little biased here. I love speaking to women entrepreneurs, and not simply because they are women entrepreneurs, but because there are so few of them as it is. So it is always very refreshing to catch up with somebody who's been in the space for a long time and is really making a mark. So this is a very, very good conversation. A lot of insights around fundraising, around the kind of support that AdLunam brings, about NFTs, and just general advice on how to really make the best of this space. So I can't wait for you guys to hear this. Let's deep dive right in. Hi, Nadja. Thank you so much for making the time to speak to me today. How are you doing?
Hey, Tarisha, very well, and you? Happy to be finally be able to catch up. I think we've been talking for a while to get this done, and I'm happy that we're finally doing it. So looking forward to an amazing conversation.
Absolutely, likewise. I think Web3 is always on, and there are so many variables that are in play when you're scheduling a call with somebody who's on the other side of the world. But I'm glad that we could make the time, and I'm looking forward to this wonderful conversation as well.
And we always say that Web3 never sleeps, but then when
Exactly.
it doesn't sleep in the bear market, then I don't know what to call it when the bull market arrives, because then there's no sleep.
Yeah, absolutely no sleep. Yeah, that is absolutely true. But yeah, Web3 is not for beginners. You can like
I
that
mean,
particular
we have
meme.
to work hard to make it easier for beginners to join us. Otherwise, we're going to run out of old timers.
Absolutely, yeah. People are going to run out of steam, right? Because for how long can you perhaps, be on always on the go? So I completely concur with you there. But Nadja, for our listeners, I know a lot about you and have followed you for a while with the work that you've done so far in Web3. But just for our listeners, can you tell us a little about your background as an entrepreneur? You're a board member in several places, advisor, and you've won several awards. So can you perhaps give us a little background about yourself and also perhaps share some key milestones that have shaped your journey in blockchain and crypto?
Yeah, I think this is always the most difficult question to answer
Hmm.
because you never know quite where to start. And, every person's journey is so
Unique.
uniquely individual to them.
Yeah.
But I'll give a brief rundown of kind of how I came into Web3, because I think it's very important always to highlight that no one has a linear path, generally speaking, but especially when it
Hmm.
comes to this industry and to technology in general, cutting edge technologies. We read the books about the Silicon Valley greats, and we think that's the roadmap to get places. But it's so easy in this industry that we are in to find an entry point pretty much anywhere. So
Right.
mine looked like this. I had been working in what was at the time called the digital marketing industry. I mean, of course, now many years later, we don't call anything digital marketing anymore because marketing is
Yeah.
always digital, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
at that time, I had run a digital marketing agency early 2010s. So I was very used to working with people in a context where I knew what the technologies of the future were going to do for business, but my clients didn't necessarily understand.
Right.
I had very many conversations with business owners where they said, I don't see the point of having a website. I don't need to get on social media because no one's going to message me there. And of course, we know that this has shifted tremendously since. But
Yeah.
and there's a lot of parallels here with Web3, of course, in terms of being early. But so
Hmm.
I've gone on from being in the digital marketing agency space to working for a pharmaceutical company. So I was head of multimedia marketing and communications for top 50 global pharma. Very different environment because, of course,
Right.
heavily regulated, and every single word that you put out there has to go through the regulatory approval team's process. And so didn't feel that even though the technology was offering all these possibilities, that the industry that I was in supported the evolution of how we do things. And again, we are seeing parallels today in the Web3 space, where it's this divide between, okay, how do we push max innovation while at the same time there are governments wanting to regulate, and sometimes they need to regulate because we also see what happens when they don't.
Right.
So I'd worked in the pharma industry and just, got to the point where I realized this is not for me. So my son and I started traveling. I
Right.
took what I at the time called early retirement, which is really funny looking back now because I couldn't sit still for even a
Right.
minute. So there was no
Yeah.
retirement for me. I was very bored very quickly. And
Hmm.
then I got the opportunity to learn about blockchain, but as I said, in a very particular way. Got offered the opportunity to work as a journalist. Now, I'm a writer. I love writing. I'd worked as a journalist in school, but I'd never actually, pursued that path professionally and never thought that I would. It wasn't something that I wanted to do as a career. However,
Hmm.
I had time on my hands. I was traveling and great, but I also want to do something with my mind. And so when I started writing about blockchain, of course, I had to do tremendous amounts of research. And the more I researched it, the more I understood that there was a clear divide of pre-blockchain and
Hmm.
post-blockchain. So
Hmm.
it's almost as if there had been a dimensional shift in the way that the world is able to look at certain things. And so from there on out, I say that I was completely sold. Um, I truly saw that there are possibilities for solutions to problems
Right.
that we face, whereas we had always been told that those problems were not solvable.
Right.
And that's why I've been in this industry for the past 7 years plus. I don't think I'll ever leave it. So
Hmm.
in this space, I've done also a broad number of things. So fractional CMO for different Web3 companies. I had a Web3 communications agency. This was in the ICO days, which was really crazy. If you think
Yeah.
you've seen hype in Web3, you ain't got nothing on that period. I mean, it was
Absolutely. I
a
agree.
it was an interesting period, but I'm glad that we've matured and we continue to mature. And then
Yeah.
I also have been advising a lot of companies over the years, investing in companies. And then 2 years ago, Jason Fernandez, my co-founder, and I started AdLunam. We'd worked together before, wanted to bring some new solutions to the industry's problems. And then our co-founder, Lawrence Hudson, also joined us. And the rest is history. Very, very happy to be building something in the space and working with incredible people, both our team as well as all the partners that we have, and really just being part of seeing Web3 grow from strength to strength, because we
Yeah.
all know what the media covers about Web3. When Bitcoin price is high, it's the best industry in the world because it's the future. As soon
Right.
as the Bitcoin price drops, no, this is all a scam, this is a bubble, it's all over, let's go to the next thing. But when you work in the industry and you deal with people on a daily basis working to create that future, I think you have a very different understanding of what this future might look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you've seen a few cycles, like, you and I both have, and been in the market for the long term, you realize that there is nothing like building for the short term in Web3. You're either here for the long haul, or or perhaps it's something that you're trying out, and then you lose heart and you give up. But I always think that there is no way that you can perhaps be like a short-term builder, because those are people who are experimenting, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in order to really build something that sustains, you have to survive these multiple cycles.
I think another important point to what you said, which is very, very important. I think what you're highlighting is key and crucial. You cannot build in a short span of time, even though it
Right.
might look like that, like
Yeah.
as if it's possible. Because if
Yeah.
you look at this industry in a bull market, decisions get made in the wink of an eye, and you can go from zero to a couple of million in just a few days. I mean, that's what happened to us when we were raising funds. We raised $1 million in 24 hours. We closed a 2.5 million funding round in 5 days. I mean, it was incredible to see, just from a personal perspective as a founder, the movement. I've seen this with other startups that I've worked with as well. I mean, over the years in these different bull cycles. But the problem with this is the sustainability of the industry is severely compromised when that's the only way that people evaluate this industry. So whether if I'm a retail investor, for example, or if I'm simply a user of Web3 products, although, I mean, I'm sure we'll speak about this. There's not so many Web3 users just yet. And of course, there's many reasons why, and we need to work on making that easier for people to making it easier for people to onboard. But if you're a retail investor and your perspective of crypto, of Web3, of blockchain is a short term, okay, I'm going to put in a couple of money today, and then in a couple of days or weeks, I'm going to 10x. If that's your perspective of the industry, it will always be the kind of industry where short-sighted decisions are made. And in a good market, you know, when there's a lot of liquidity, of course, you can make a lot of gains. But the more you know and understand about this industry, the more the decisions, the investment decisions that you make are more well-informed, understanding what the opportunities are as well as the limitations. Because I think, you know, when we talk about protecting people in the industry, we who are professionals, we know how difficult it is to do very basic things, you know, using a wallet. I mean, if you're doing transfers, there's so many things, even though you might know what to do, there's so many things that can go wrong. But because we are, let's say, on more familiar terms with what all of this means and how it works and who to ask for help, it's easier for us. But for the average retail investor, it's almost a dangerous place to be sometimes. And I think really when it comes to, you know, talking about Web3, then we always need to keep in mind, okay, but what we have today is not what we should have tomorrow. We probably will be repeating a lot of the mistakes that we've made in the previous bull market. We'll repeat them in this market again. But I do believe that as time goes by and more people who survive cycles, especially founders who have survived cycles, then make better decisions for themselves, for their team, for their project, and of course for their investor community.
Absolutely, I completely concur. I think experience everywhere kind of works out for the better, makes your decision making even more, it becomes more nuanced and more enhanced because of the experience that kind of adds to it. And that the same thing goes for Web3. But in Web3, because the cycles are shorter and the learnings are greater, I think if a founder is really able to survive multiple cycles, then that is the founder that I'd put my bet on.
Yes, and I mean, just a general rule of thumb for me is when I meet people during a bear market, especially founders building projects during a bear market, I make a mental note that those are the people to watch very closely as the market returns. Because I have met people over the past, let's say, 2 years of this cycle that we've been in, and it's been very difficult to get funding. It's been very difficult to get community traction. It's been difficult to get pretty much anything done. And despite all of this, the drive and the passion and the determination they have to make their vision a reality have seen them gone on to, incredible feats that is not so easy in a market like this. Compare that to if a founder comes in when the money is flowing and, everything is at their fingertips. That's great. But you also have to understand, especially if you're evaluating projects, what is the background experience of these people on the team in Web3? Have they been through a cycle like this before? Did they, it's not a question of surviving in the sense sometimes startups fail. But what happened? Did they pivot to something else? Is that pivot something that makes more sense for the market we're in? So you can actually tell a lot about a startup simply by looking at the team and especially the founders, of course.
Absolutely. I think they're the ones who are driving that vision. And ultimately, founders with the right kind of experience and the right kind of skill set are the ones who are able to really create a sustainable business. And that is what we need, I think, in Web3. We need more sustainable businesses, and that doesn't mean that you have to be perhaps making money from day one, obviously, but that is ideal. But at least perhaps you're choosing the right path, and as we kind of talked about, you're building for the long term.
Exactly.
So now moving on to AdLunam, can you tell us a little about, as a co-founder there, how does the platform leverage your wealth of experience to make like something, just impact on crypto projects and startup acceleration? Because that is what you guys are doing. And how can perhaps startups who are looking to get the relevant help get in touch with you? And is there like a criteria of selection that you guys have?
So in short, yeah, very good question, multi-pronged question. So I'll go through them one by one. So first of all, what exactly we do? So we are a Web3 accelerator and investment ecosystem. Now that's quite a mouthful. So let's look at the different components of this. First of all, we primarily specialize in fundraising.
Okay.
So we, as a company, I mean, our objective is to fundraise for clients. Sometimes that involves very often it involves of us ourselves also investing into these companies. But so we have an investor network on the institutional investment end, and then we have a community of retail investors on the retail investment end. So I'll go a little bit into what each of those do, and then at the same time also weave in the experience that we bring to the table and really why we started AdLunam exactly for this reason. So
Right.
firstly, on the institutional side, so I mean, getting funded in Web3 is, depending on the market cycle, either a massive issue or not an issue at all. When there's a lot of money, a lot of liquidity in the market, in a peak bull market, let's say, almost anyone gets funded. It's not always the kind of funds that everyone wants. I mean, there
Yeah.
are types of institutional investors. There are VCs that you very much would like to invest in you, and there are VCs that, if only you knew, perhaps you would not have had put them in your cap table. Now, for founders entering the Web3 space as a founder for the first time, because I think even if you have been in the Web3 space, but you haven't founded a company yourself, it's a different ball game looking kind of from the outside in, even if you have been part of an executive team, but really being the founder and being the person to make all of those decisions, that's a different story altogether. And
Right.
oftentimes founders in Web3 have not been founders in other industries outside of Web3. Now, that's not an issue because this is a horse of a different color, but at the same time, not 100%, because there's a lot of wisdom and learning and best practices, from traditional industries that
Absolutely.
either we still practice in Web3 or they are missing, and we see the quite negative results of them not being there. So for founders in the Web3 space, it's incredibly important to be in an environment where all the ingredients that contribute to their recipe for success is present. Now, that is an easy thing or it's a difficult thing, depending on a number of factors. As much as Web3, for example, is very democratizing, if you find yourself in a city like Dubai or Singapore or, let's say Paris, where there's also a lot happening now, if you find yourself in these major hubs, you will make a lot of connections, of course, if that's something that you're aiming to do. However, if you're on a different location, perhaps it might not be so easy to go to meetups and meet the right people. And of course,
Right.
even meeting the right people at meetups, that's a lot of work. You
Yeah.
don't know if the people that you want to meet or if you need to be, if you need to meet, are going to be at specific events. So it's quite a hit and miss. But of course, you can do all of this yourself. However, the smart way to do it, of course, is to partner with companies specializing in exactly what your needs are. So this is really for us where AdLunam then came in, is we act as, let's say, a middleman between what the startup needs. And we typically start working with startups in their early stage round. So they might have raised angel investment or seed investment, and they're now getting ready to go into the VC investment in the private sale, etc. Sometimes we do start working with them earlier on if they are very promising, because we do put them, of course, through quite a rigorous due diligence process. I mean, of course, we can only start working with them if we have sponsors giving prizes to the investor to the startups participating. We also take startups on an investor road in the startup, in the public sale of the startup. And there also we co-launch projects with other launch pads. So we are connected and partnered with a number of the top 10 launch pads. And so also goes for centralized exchanges, for market makers, for a wide range of other partners, media, press, etc. So really, it's a full house service in terms of getting a startup connected to anyone that they need to be connected to, as well
Right.
as getting the funding they need, both institutionally and retail investor.
Wow, that's wonderful. I think because being an entrepreneur myself, I understand the kind of challenges that come in the way of entrepreneurs when they are fundraising. It becomes like a full-time job. And for you to be able to lend a helping hand, make the right connects, that can really go a long way as well. So if a startup perhaps wants to enlist your services and want to get involved in your ecosystem, what would that process look like?
So we just officially launched. We've been unofficially working with projects in the accelerator during the bear market, but we've officially launched and opened it to the public on the 9th of February, so just a few days ago. So typically what happens is, as I said earlier, we have quite a strict due diligence process that we follow. So as soon as a startup makes contact, expresses interest, we will be requiring some documentation, some forms to be filled out. And then we go through this due diligence in order to make sure that it's a good fit in terms of the network that we have. We would, as I said earlier, we wouldn't easily take on a new client in terms of fundraising if we don't believe that our network of investors will have the appetite to fund this project. Just to manage expectations from the beginning. And then once we do start working with a startup, we are heavily invested ourselves. So their success really becomes our success. We take tokens. So we are fully invested in ensuring that the startup sees the success that it needs to, because as I said, their success is our success. And Absolutely. Then just to finally answer your question about kind of why this came about. So all three of us co-founders have been working with startups in the Web3 space for years. So we've all been working with them as advisors, as part of different companies, working in different capacities. So we've really seen and experienced what it's like to build a Web3 startup through so many different lenses. And the one thing that when Jason and I were discussing AdLunam in the initial stages was, how can we support people using really simple, easy solutions? The concept of a launchpad, something that I find quite interesting is people are often not familiar, even if they work in the Web3 industry, they are often not familiar with what it is unless they need one. When you need one, that's when you start understanding, okay, this is a launchpad, this is what it does, this is how it works. But then because there are so many launchpads out there these days, you don't always get the same quality support from each and every one of them. There are some launchpads that will not speak to you unless, you have 50,000 followers on Twitter. So it's also incredibly important to, as a founder, to discern who are the people that you will allow to guide you. Because the problem I find with Web3 is the principle, the ethos of Web3 is everyone is helping each other. However, very often when founders find themselves in this crucial period of, institutional fundraising all the way to public fundraising in the IDO, that they become the prey for the predators in the industry. So there's a lot of people offering to help. There's a lot of people asking founders for things, but not really giving back. And so unfortunately, a lot of founders, as we've said, have not been founders before. Maybe they are even new to Web3 and they've never been a founder before. And so there's so many challenges that already are coming their way. So how can they make sure that they have the most valuable, up-to-date information, guidance, and support at their fingertips. And that is what a launchpad is supposed to be. It's not always the case, but we definitely pride ourselves on the fact that that is exactly what we offer startups. What we needed is what we offer.
That's brilliant. I think that is how best of the solutions kind of come about, right? When you are building something that you feel the need for, and your peer group also requires that you see a real need, and that is how I think sustainable solutions are created.